Father Frank Taylor is an Irish St. Patrick's missionary who has worked for many years in Kenya, Zambia and Malawi. He was ordained in the year 1970. In the year 2023, he turned 80 years of age and he agreed to grant us an interview on SPMS Media, telling us about his family and childhood and later on his vocation and work as a missionary in Africa. He begins with his childhood.
Well, I was born in Dublin on the 15th of October 1943, and I was the 10th child of 11, 6 boys and 5 girls. Of course, now we're only four of us, 4 boys, 5 boys and 1 girl. So growing up, it was primary school, secondary school. I loved to play football, and I was fairly good at the football. I was the captain of the team that won the Dublin Minor Championship in Gaelic, and I was the captain of the team that won the All-Ireland under-18 in Gaelic football. So we were quite, I loved the sport, and I was very relaxed at it, and I didn't have any ambitions, which helped me to play very relaxed. So it was a good time for me. Life was good. I had 0 interest in priesthood, absolutely no interest whatsoever. And I remember quite well, because when I would even see priests, I would tend to try to distance myself from them. I don't know, I didn't like the priest style or whatever. And
So how did Father Frank get to know about the St. Patrick's Fathers?
It happened, I was in 5th year, and this priest was coming in to talk to us. And I said, oh, good. That's a day off for a time out, so I don't have to worry about this guy, what he's going to talk about. And so I sat back and relaxed, and he drew him out of Africa, and he said, more or less, we need you. And wow, something in that moment, I said, oh my God, I think he's talking to me. And I didn't like the idea that, no, that this is not part of my plan. So but he sent around a little note, are you interested? So I kind of had to say yes, truthfully. But it was a shock to my system, because in our family we have no priests in our family, so it wasn't sort of the way to go. And but then what happened was that the vocations director, he lost my address. So after school, when I finished school from in 6th year, and there was nothing from Kiltegan, so I decided, well, I'd go and get myself a job. And I worked for a while in an insurance company, but it kept nagging me that this thing about I need to give it a try, because if I don't give it a try, it'll be with me all my life. I didn't think that it would come to fruition, but I felt that I had to go, so that I'd go and test it, and then I'd be sent back, and that'd be the end of the story. So I actually wrote then to Kiltegan and said that I was interested, and so he got back on to me and he said, oh yeah, I lost your address, so I couldn't contact you. So anyhow, I went down to Kiltegan for the interview, and I couldn't tell anyone at home where I was going. I just said, I'm going. And I disappeared. And I stayed overnight in Kiltegan. And my people didn't know where I was because I just couldn't get myself to tell them, oh my God, I'm thinking of the priesthood. I mean, this to me was too difficult. So anyhow, they said, okay, we'll sign you up, you know, you come in September. And I remember packing my bags and saying, now will you get a list from Kiltegan on what you need to bring in those days? And I decided that I should bring as least amount of stuff as possible because I didn't expect to be staying too long. And my friends at home would say, what are you doing going down to that place? I mean, no, there's no way that you're going to survive down there. But anyhow, when I went to Kiltegan, and my sister brought me, and she said to me, if you don't like it, come home. You're always welcome. So that was one of the big things in the vocation, that my sister said, no, if you don't like it, come home. You're always welcome. Because there was something. Yes?
Do you remember what year that was? The year you actually went to Kiltegan for the first time?
62.
1962. All right. Okay. Okay. Well,
yeah.
Thank you. Right.
62.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you remember the name of the, the priest that came to the school, or the very first men who formed you in Kiltegan, when you arrived? Do you have any names left?
Well, Jimmy Lane was the director, and Lee McSorley, the priest that was the vocations director, was Lim McSorley. Yeah. And then Father Jimmy Lane, and in my first year in Kiltegan, I got on very well with him. A lot of the priests didn't particularly like him or found him difficult, but I got on very well with him. That I found it. I found the year there satisfying, and then I was chosen to go to the university in Cork, which surprised me also, and I had a happy 3 years in Cork, because they were wondering about who would go. If you were sent to Nigeria, you would need to be a teacher qualification. So I was sent for a BA degree, and I managed to get it anyhow. A BA in economics and geography. But I'd say I got it by the skin of my teeth. But anyhow, I got it, and it was very satisfying. And one interesting story was that I had asked one of the students who was in Cork that he would write to me. In those days, everything was by writing. Write to me, and on the envelope, he would put down my name, Francis Taylor. And if I had got the degree, he was right to put down BA. And if I didn't get the degree, he'd just write down Francis Taylor. So the letter came, of course, and he wrote Francis Taylor. And of course, there was no BA. So this was his way of a little joke. Because in fact, then when I opened the letter, he said, congratulations, you have a degree in a BA now. But it was a bit of a shock to see that the envelope. That was Billy Kennefick that did that. But anyhow, that was an interesting. And in those days, things were different, because for my graduation, nobody came to my graduation. When I went down to Cork for graduation, and I was there, of course, with the other guys, but nobody from my family came, or no relatives or friends came. There I was on my own. And that's the way it was in those days. There was no big fanfare about, you know, passing and all of that. You just went and you got, at least that was in my tradition. So anyhow, I got the degree, and then my vocation began to become alive. And up to this point, I had felt, yeah, if they send me away, fine, no problem. If I stay, fine, okay. I was in the middle. And then when I went to first year in theology, I began to feel, this is what I want to do. And I began to be a little bit afraid that I may not be chosen, whereas my desire now had increased to actually to want to be a missionary. And it wasn't so much about ordination or priesthood, it was to be about being a missionary. And so Kiltegan was very pleasant, and yeah, there was people came and left, but
33 of them started out in Kiltegan, and 11 were ordained in 1970. He recalls his first appointment, which was to Kenya.
Yeah, out of our class of 33, 11 of us were ordained. We started as 33 and 11 of us were ordained. My first appointment was to Kenya.
Sorry, Frankie, what year were you ordained? Sorry.
1970.
1970. All right. And tell me, Frank, any of your classmates around that you can mention, just one or two? Your classmates?
Oliver McHugh.
Oliver. All right.
Yeah. Terry Nash. Those the two I can remember now.
That's right, Frankie.
Yeah. Terry and Ollie are close friends. And so when I arrived in Kenya, again, this was another experience, that when I got off the plane in Nairobi, and I stood on top of the gangway, and I looked out, and I said to myself, this is where I want to spend the rest of my life. It was a kind of I don't know, they call it seminal moments, or where suddenly it became absolutely clear, this is where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. This is my vocation. So I never had any doubts about that. It was very clear to me. So when I was appointed first to Kitale in the diocese of Eldoret in those days, and I was there with Mick Kelly, and Steve O'Donoghue, and it was a wonderful time in Kenya, because it was shortly after independence, booming and very positive, and I started as a teacher in a government secondary school, and I liked it, but the headmaster didn't like me. It was Mr. Robinson, and we had some clashes, because part of my time I used to divide with, I had been given a few outstations to look after, and while I loved the teaching, the pastoral work also was very appealing to me. So when classes would be finished, then I'd go off and do some pastoral work, and he didn't like that, and he actually he had me before the Teacher Service Commission, accusing me of not following the proper rules. But anyhow, it passed, And then I spoke to the bishop, and he said, there's a place called Chelangani, and it's a new parish, and would you like to take it over? So I said, great. So I moved to Chelangani. The house had been just built by Steve O'Donoghue, but he had never moved into it. And in those days, of course, you had no electricity and no water, but those things didn't matter. I mean, you had a lamp and you drew water from the well, and it was just, that was life. And Kitale is a wonderful place because you can go in on a Monday and play golf, and then you can spend the rest of the week doing your work. And then you're always looking forward to Sunday evening. And Sunday evening, you're heading into town to meet all the lads and maybe play some bridge and have a nice meal, and then go out and play golf in the morning, and then buy some things for the house, and then head back towards the evening. I had a Volkswagen Golf, not a Golf, a Beetle, and so the roads were terrible, but I used to manage to get. Sometimes I had to put chains on the wheels manually because the road was very, very muddy. But yeah, no, it where all the different tribes were present, and there was a unity, and the church was ready to expand and explode. And with Fintan MacDonald, he was my mentor, and we set up the basic Christian communities. That was in '71, at the very beginning of the Christian communities. Fintan was one of our men who was a great advocate for the communities, and so in a settlement scheme we were able to do that. And it was only much later that the schemes turned violent because the politicians came in and trying to get people's votes and saying this is our land and those people shouldn't be there and all that. But the time I was there was very peaceful. People were very, very welcoming, and we set about setting up the church in this area, and so it was great experience.
After 3 years in Kenya, Father Frank was informed of the plans for a new mission in Zambia.
At the end of my 3 years there, I had a visit from Ginny Newman, who was the regional at the time, and he came out to see me, and he said, we'd like you to go to Zambia. And I said, well, I'm very happy here. And he said, well, we wouldn't be sending you if you weren't happy, because we're setting up a new mission in Zambia, and you have some experience. There'll be two newly ordained priests, and Peter Finnegan will lead the team, and there'll be 4 of us. So Michael Murphy and myself and Brendan McCarran and Peter Finnegan. So when we arrived, we were given the Cathedral Parish as our first parish in Lusaka, because the Archbishop Malingo didn't like the Jesuits, and he wouldn't give them the cathedral. So we newcomers into the diocese, and he said, no, you take the cathedral. And so we took the cathedral. And the wonderful thing about the Jesuits was that when they left the house, they left everything. It was like they got up in the morning and they walked out and closed the door. Everything was there. Everything. That it was just complete. So we didn't have to buy anything. And they left the car as well. So there was a great sense of generosity on their part, to say that, yeah, So our relationship then, of course, with the Jesuits was very good. There was Polish Jesuits and Irish Jesuits, and yeah, we got on well with all of them. And so I worked in Garden Compound and Kaunda Square, and again, you know, there were happy times. And then I went out to a place called Chongwe, where I built a house and we started a new parish. And again, it was taken away. Part of the Jesuits conceded this particular area on the Great East Road. And yeah, I was there, and yeah, I was happy to leave Kenya because I felt God was calling me to move on. I knew that the call that Denny Newman had, it wasn't just from him. That I knew that God was saying to me, it's time for you to move on, even though you're well settled and whatever, but no, you need to move on to something else. And so I went with a happy heart. And then, of course, the other thing is you leave all your mistakes behind you and you can start afresh in a new place. And you say, well, you know, I had great experiences, made a few mistakes, but now I can kind of, you know, maybe do things slightly differently, or maybe be less authoritarian or more kind or whatever. And then so PJ Breen joined me in Jongwe, and we spent yeah, good times together. We worked very well together, hand in hand, and it was a happy time there. And then, of course, Peter Finnegan was then chosen by the Society as Superior General. But in the meantime, he was the Vicar General for the Archdiocese of Lusaka. So then Archbishop Malingo called me in, and he said to me, you won't believe this, he said, I'm appointing you as Vicar General of the Archdiocese of Lusaka. And I said, no, that's not possible. And he said, no, I have already consulted Kiltegan and they have agreed. Now this wasn't true, but this was the word that said, okay, well, you know, if Kiltegan has said, you know, it's okay, no problem, you can go ahead. But I was never obviously consulted. It was just a direct appointment. And I was a bit of a, what did they say, a round plug in a square hole. It wasn't my forte. It wasn't what I was cut out to be. But I tried. Archbishop Malingo was a unique archbishop, and so from 1978 to 1982, I was the Vicar General, and then a serious crisis arose in the diocese, very serious crisis. Well, first we had a visitation from Rome, and then after that, the Archbishop was away, so I was sort of taking charge, and an incident happened with the choir master of the diocese, and he had abused a particular sister and had struck her. And I said to him, listen, no, there's a cardinal coming and there's going to be a big celebration, but you can't direct the choir because you have a case to answer. You have an mlando, as they say. So I said, no, it's not possible. So I was acting independently. And so it happened then that when the Archbishop came back, he wasn't happy with his decision because the choir master was his special person. He had a particularly relationship with him of, yeah. They were both on the same hymn sheet anyhow. So, but in the meantime, the nuncio got involved, and I had to do some work that wasn't very pleasant over certain things that were of a grave nature, and I had to see how I could handle the situation while the Archbishop was away. And so, you know, I was under instructions from the nuncio to some extent. And so, of course, when he came back, he said, you know, you're my alter ego. You're not supposed to be listening to anybody else except myself. So I said, well, you know, that's how it worked out. So I was sort of accused of a serious disruption of the archdiocese, and the CID got involved, the special branch, and I had to answer to them. It became a police case, and so I was very fortunate at the time. There was one of our priests who was visiting us. His name was Pat Kelly, and Pat said, listen, you can't go to this meeting on your own. I'll go with you as a witness to what happens. So anyhow, I went out to this meeting, and it was mostly the Archbishop who was directing the meeting, and he said, no, he went on a diatribe. He went on and he attacked me left, right and centre. So for about an hour and a half, and I tried to say nothing, just listen, and no response. I said, thank you, Your Grace, and thank you. And I went home with Pat, and of course I was fuming. I was angry as hell, because, you know, everything that was said, I didn't agree with it anyhow. But Pat, I said, that's it, I'm resigning. So I was going to write a long letter of resignation. And Pat, being a very wise man, he said to me, when you're writing the letter, write three words or three sentences. Your Grace, thank you for the confidence that you had in me in appointing me a Vicar General. I now realize that you no longer have any confidence in me, and so I am resigning on this day. And I thank you for the trust that you put in me, for giving me this post in that time. Yours faithfully, Francis Taylor. So when the letter was delivered and I was called in, and he said, you can't resign. No, I don't give you permission to resign. I'm the Archbishop. I will decide when you resign. You're not the one who decides. So then there was another wonderful, I've been very lucky in my life with people who've been there when they were needed. Vincent McNamara was there at the time. And so Vincent went in to see the Archbishop. Now, normally, if you go into the Archbishop, he eats people for breakfast. In other words, he can overcome anyone. He's such an imposing figure. But Vincent went in anyhow, and he told me afterwards it was the first time in his life where he called out that he was also a canon lawyer. He was He was a doctorate in canon law. So that when the bishop decided to talk about how he could resign or when he could resign, Vincent was able to tell him, sorry, there is a freedom of resignation. So the Archbishop had more or less to stay quiet. So I went to see the Archbishop then, and kindly, very kindly, this was before Easter, very kindly, I asked him, would he allow me to stay in the country until my leave came in June, and then I would go home, because he had said, you can't work anymore in the Archdiocese. I've consulted my consultors, and they've said, can't stay anymore in the Archdiocese. Now, I don't believe he consulted them, but that doesn't matter. He was the Archbishop. He decided that was the way. And yeah, I said, okay. He said, yeah, okay, you can stay for the 2 to 3 months. So I took a holiday to Zimbabwe and down to Durban with my cousin. And on the way back, I found out that Archbishop Malingo had been transferred to Rome, and that he was no longer the Archbishop of the Archdiocese. So there was a certain then relief that, the burden wasn't falling anymore on me. I wasn't the center of this problem. I was just a small player, but that it was the bishops and who decided with the nuncio that, he would be recalled to Rome and that he would vacate the...
Archbishop Milingo did become very famous both as the Archbishop of Lusaka and indeed afterwards. I asked Father Frank to describe him to those who wouldn't have known him.
He was deeply Catholic. In other words, the church meant everything to him. And in his early days, he had an encounter with a priest, and the priest hit him. And it always remained in his psyche about this white priest that hit him when he was in the church, and he started laughing. And he often brought this back to say, so there was a deep resentment to, I would say, to white priests. And so the Jesuits, and the first time when he was first ordained as bishop in Lusaka, on his first talk, he castigated the Jesuits for all the things that they were doing wrong. And they were the ones who had chosen him, of course. They were the ones who felt he was the man for the job. I found him a pleasant enough person, but he got into the healing ministry and he became obsessed with the healing ministry. And, of course, the priests were opposed to it generally. And so there was a war going on between the priests and the Archbishop because of his healing ministry. And there were things going on in the healing ministry that some people took grave exception to. But, the Archbishop himself, he was a good man. In fact, he had a lot going for him. But the anger that was in him, he never was able to get to grips with it. And so when people would come into me, instead of going into him, he resented that. He said, you're like an old grandmother, receiving these people, listening to them. And you shouldn't be doing that, You shouldn't be consoling them. You should be hammering them instead, But I never got into the web of the inner circle of the Archbishop. I always kept out of it because I never felt that it would be a place where I'd be comfortable. So I stayed away. And of course that wasn't very good. But, you know, otherwise, he was a man of prayer and a man of God. But, you know, it just got too much for him when the bishops turned against him, and basically Rome turned against him. Then he went out on his own into a dark place. But I would say in his own mind, he probably never left the church, even though he's a member of the Moonies and he's married. And in his own mind, I'd say he's still the Archbishop, you know.
During his sabbatical, after leaving Zambia, Father Frank got a call from the Superior General, Father Peter Finnegan at the time, suggesting some sabbatical programs.
Yeah, and I went home for sabbatical. Peter rang me and said I was to go to a place called Dalgan. I wasn't particularly interested, but I felt, you know, it'd be a good place to go anyhow, but I wasn't interested. And he rang me up and he said, would you go to California instead of Dalgan Park? And I said, I'd be delighted to go. And so I went off to California for 4 months. And the Monsignor went away and he left his Cadillac and he left everything more or less in my charge. And the parish was the parish of Ascension. And the people there were extraordinarily good people and kind and welcoming. And to have an Irish priest was like manna from heaven. This Irish accent, you know, there's a lot of the Catholics, of course, have Irish roots. And so this young Irishman coming in was, this was great. It wasn't necessary to do with me personally, but it was to do with, you know, that tradition that was there that I was just moving into. So I made a lot of very good friends there that, yeah, I could say that, you know, I still have one or two left. Most of them are dead now, you know, but it was a very good time for me. And yeah, and you meet different people and you have different experiences, and yeah, it was good. It was good. And then I came home and then I went to Binos to do a 3-month course in spiritual direction, which I wanted to do. And yeah, again, Binos is a very special place. Yeah, I was there with some very eminent Jesuits who were directing us. And yeah, and we had a lovely group of sisters and priests and brothers, and yeah, there was about 25 of us, and we all got on together. And
Father Frank rounded up his sabbatical by doing a scripture course not far from Rome. At this stage, he was ready for his next appointment.
I was appointed then to Malawi. And Malawi was, I suppose, a little bit of a shock because the people in Malawi are so different to the people in Zambia. They're extremely reserved and quiet, and they'd never invite you to their house for a cup of tea or for a meal. In Zambia, that would be normal enough. But I quickly got into the work in a place called Molere. It was in the Cholo district in Chikwawa Diocese. And I was there for 7 years, climbing the mountains and building churches and building Christian communities, and it was all good. Yeah. And then after 7 years, yeah, it was time to move. And I moved down into the valley. Again, 6 years down there. They described the valley as it's like a furnace where the door of the furnace is closed in on you. It's so hot. But I personally never experienced heat. Doesn't bother me. I mean, it's heat, it's hot, it's very hot, it's very warm, but it doesn't get in on me. It I don't get anxious or worried about it. It's just it's there and that's it, you know, and it'll cool down eventually. So they were kind of, pastoral years of very satisfying work. And then I was asked to go to Lilongwe to be the assistant regional to Paddy Haken. And I ended up being in Chigoneka for nearly 20 years. And the people in Chigoneka, of course, are, again, they're very special people. They have great faith and, and they know what the church is about. And it was a real pleasure to be there and work there. And, I had a couple of people who, of course, didn't like me at all. In that place, and they even reported me to the Archbishop. And the big thing against me was that I was something of a dictator. So I suppose I didn't recognize myself in the description, but it was useful for me in order to be able to reflect on, you know, how I am as a pastor. You know, maybe there is something of that in me, that I want to get things done and I want to get them done now. Let's go and do it, you know. And so that directing operations would be part of my style, you know, and getting things done. And we built an office block and we built a huge hall and we extended the church and we built Tandire from scratch, and we built some of the other places from scratch, and and then my time came when I was approaching 80, and I said, now it's time to go, and I'm thinking of retiring. But actually, I was actually only retiring from Chigoneka. Deep down in my heart, that same call that I heard 60 years before was still there. No, Africa is my life. So when I went home and people were saying, no, it's time, you've been long enough out there, come on home, and we need you at home. And I said, sure, but it doesn't sit. It doesn't sit on me. I don't feel it. You know, I just don't feel comfortable. I know that I'm very comfortable here. I mean, comfortable, not in relaxed, not in just seeking my comfort, but I just feel that here is where I belong. You always have to have your bags packed. If, there's nothing permanent, you know, even if your life is here and everything at the same time, you know, circumstances come and they say, well, you can no longer be my servant anymore, you know, go somewhere else. So God is always, you know, the key mover, and, you know, when his time comes, he will direct me what to do. But in the meantime, I'm here at Tengo and Tenga, and if I can boast a little bit, on my first year I built 4 churches, and in my second year I built 4 churches, and I am with Father Chacha, and he said, now before the end of the year you need to build a 5th one. So, but I told him that's not possible. But I love doing that, and there's great cooperation. The people know that I'm a limited edition, and you know, there'll come a time when I won't be around. So there's great cooperation when they say, no, we would like to have our church built. They come and they do massive work.
Unfortunately, Father Frank fell at a funeral and fractured his shoulder in February 2023. He tells us how that impacted him.
This year has been a tough year because I was at a funeral in February and I slipped and I fractured my shoulder, and it was a serious fracture, and the doctor here said that you need an operation. But anyhow, I went home for the operation, but the surgeon in where I went said, we can fix it without operating. So that was a wonderful blessing. But I was stranded. I couldn't drive, and I couldn't really say mass for a while because I couldn't lift the chalice. I was stranded. Yeah. So it was a funny kind of time.
Father Frank turned 80 in the year 2023. I asked him how his birthday was and how turning 80 feels.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. Out of all imagination, I'm not a celebrations person, and I didn't. I said, it's just another birthday, and Dennis organised a wonderful party in the parish here, invited the Irish ambassador, and rang up my friends that he, without telling me, of course, people who I know and who came and had it in the hall, and it was super. It was really one of the big highlights of the year. I did, when I was at home, I celebrated my anniversary because of COVID. I hadn't celebrated it in the year 2020. So when I was at home that time, I celebrated. And that also, they sprung me a surprise and had an amazing gathering of people, of family, and two wonderful experiences that I just have to thank all those people who were so, who appreciated, I felt appreciated and loved, I suppose, and it did a lot of good for me. And then all the gifts. I don't think I got your gifts, Joe, but I'm still open. The year is over. Yeah.
It's on the way. So, Frank, if I ask you, how do you feel turning 80? Wow, nobody ever thinks they'll get there, but you have got there. How does it feel for you reaching that milestone?
Feels great. Feels great. Because they say, 80 is the new 70. So that, because I didn't mention that I had a heart attack when I was out playing golf. And then I said, no, let me go to the hospital and check it out. And I drove in one day and they said, no, we've just checked you and we know you've had a heart attack, but you're okay. We were going to put in 2 stents and you'll be all right. And so now I'm taking 7 tablets every day. And so the tablets, of course, make you, keep you young to some extent, that your BP is steady, your blood pressure, whatever, all of those things that you'll be worried about. So I expect that if I keep taking these tablets, I'm good for another 10 years.
Amen. Amen.
So, yeah.
Amen.
I then asked Father Frank to give advice to the newly ordained and appointed missionaries.
Prayer and commitment. To do the day, every day, do what's there to be done, and to be faithful to the program, and to pray, and everything will be very good. I mean, life will you'll be in God's hands, and you'll be safe. Yeah, that's how I feel anyhow.
I was curious to know what Father Frank felt about internationalization of the St. Patrick's membership?
I don't know. I can't even remember because then at a certain point, of course, I was completely for it. But the first beginnings of it, when it was first announced, because I joined an Irish missionary society, which was born out of the diocesan priests in Ireland who founded this, and that was our foundation. And foundation is very important. And so I felt, well, that's our roots, and we have to stick to our roots. So that was kind of how I was thinking at the beginning. But then when it came later time for serious consideration, yes, yeah. And of course I see it as a wonderful future for us.
Father Frank makes an emotional prayer for the good people of Malawi.
And we don't know whether the rains will come or won't come. It's just, Lord, bless these people, because they're in your hands, That's how I kind of feel, the good people. And they accept whatever comes to them as somehow that's what God wants. Yeah, much the same as it is today. That in my 40 years here, we certainly haven't gone forward. No. The only way we've gone forward is in freedom of expression, which is a wonderful thing.
We thank Father Frank Taylor for granting us this interview, and as a society, we say we are proud of his good work over the years and for giving us a good name wherever he went. We wish Frank all the very best for the future. Joe.Archibong for SPMS Media.